evening, viewers, and welcome to a fresh episode of Media Scan, your favorite weekend show on DD India. As always, we will take a look at the top headlines during the week, what created controversies, and what were the hottest debates. In this power-packed episode, we will also have an in-depth discussion on the media's treatment of the Delhi riots later in the show. But before we come to that, what made news? The week opened with US President Donald Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump's visit to India. After a wonderful and awe-inspiring experience in Ahmedabad, President Trump landed in Delhi with a brief stopover at the historic Taj Mahal. The never-before welcome at the Motera Stadium and the various discussions and agreements on the table all contributed to pushing the already robust Indo-US partnership to a completely new level. On his return, President Trump termed his visit very successful and Prime Minister Narendra Modi a great friend. Violence, arson and rioting in the national capital stunned the entire country through the week. The national media rose to the occasion by highlighting the plight of the violence-hit people and the steps taken to restore normalcy. The Prime Minister issued appeals for calm, and National Security Advisor was seen going into lanes for hours to speak to the affected families and instill confidence in the residents. The Delhi government announced compensation for the riot-hit families and free treatment also for them. However, some sections of the global and domestic media were called out repeatedly for playing a partisan, provocative, and even mischievous role in such a sensitive atmosphere. More on that in just a few moments. For the first time in the last many weeks, the number of coronavirus cases outside China surpassed those within China. This has obviously created a global scare, and countries are now rushing to take preventive measures. In India too, there were stories about the scaling up of its vigil, rescuing another huge batch of persons, and the health ministry going for aggressive awareness campaign. Riots, especially violence involving different communities, has always been a challenge for the media, whether print, television or digital. Journalists have the primary duty to report what happened, but the thin line between reporting and inciting gets crossed very often. Political biases play out all the time, but communal biases can be really damaging for the social fabric, especially when sentiments are running high. We saw all this happen in Delhi throughout the week. While reporters were getting beaten and identified by their religion, celebrated anchors showed damaged religious structures with impunity. Some anchor gave out the false identity of an individual for involvement in riots, thus endangering that other person's life. People even termed it an attack on a particular religion without any data to back their claim. Despite repeated police requests, some journalists stubbornly continue to peddle fake news on social media and provocative information without corroboration. We will discuss all this and more, both about the domestic as well as the global media. But for that, let me first introduce you to my special panel of guests this evening. To my left is Shekhar Iyer, a senior journalist of many years standing. Shekhar has seen the 1984 violence in Delhi and many other incidents all over the country subsequently. Welcome, Shekhar, to this evening's show. To Shekhar's left is Mr. L.N. Rao, a very senior Delhi police officer who served the nation by serving the law and order in the national capital. Welcome, Mr. Rao. And let me get on with the discussion right away. Shekhar, I'll come to you first. And my first question to you is, as we were just discussing, there is a very thin line where a journalist has to fulfill his or her duty to report what is happening because the people have a right to know, but at the same time be very, very cautious not to cross the thin line between reporting and inciting. How difficult a challenge is that? And in the light of that question, how do you see the coverage of the Delhi violence this past week?
Smitaji, you put it very correctly that there is a very thin line between covering some of these horrible events and getting to know the truth of these events and what could perhaps be a coverage that could further incite passions. So a journalist tries to strike a balance, knowing very well that whatever he or she is trying to present before the audience or the viewers has a possibility of being further inflaming passion. So there has to be a balance, but at the same time it's very important that media gets to show the horrible nature of events, because that also helps in preventing recurrence of such events. So therefore the task is, of course we have a code of conduct as to how we should go about in coverage of these events. This is very well established, where you don't identify the communities, you don't identify the places of worship, but at the same time try to tell to the extent possible the horrific nature of events.
And Mr. Rao, I'll come to you on this. As Shekhar just mentioned, there are very clear guidelines, do's and don'ts about what to do in such sensitive situations. But my question to you is, since you have served the national capital as a senior police officer for long years, we know there are lots of things we should do. Could you be more specific in telling us what are the things that we should not do?
Yeah. Smitaji, this very important subject you have taken today. People must know what is the responsibilities of media towards our society, and being we generally call it a fourth pillar of our democracy. Media, I have seen in this recent riots that media is flaring up the issues which are shown as a very violent, and particularly I have seen in so many TV channels that the media has gone to the spot and they have destructed the evidence, very important evidence. The police should have cordoned that area, but instead of, if the police has not done their duty as well, then the media should also abstain from the touching to these physical evidence which are available. Particularly, so many so many TV channels have shown that on the roof of so-called Tahir councillor, that so many bombs were found, and the Gulail was there, and so many other things which were very useful for the purpose of investigation. Those, I think those have been disturbed, and during trial I must tell you that it will have an adverse effect, because
so
the court
if I may intervene you here,
yeah.
Do you think the police was being careless in allowing them to cover so openly, or do you think the media was being irresponsible without considering what consequences it might have,
yes,
or both?
Yes, yes. It seems to be both, because the police, the foremost duty of the police is to cordon the place of occurrence which has come to their notice. That area should be secured just to keep the evidence intact. But at the same time, the media should also know their boundaries. What can they do and what they should do. They should not, without asking or without permission of the police, they should not enter the scene of crime, and they should have shown it if they wanted to show it from a distance. But that should not be that physical evidence or the evidence which is available and should not be touched, because they must be having fingerprints,
right,
or they must be having some, and in some cases I have seen that this is very dangerous also. If there is a bomb, live bomb is there, and
yes,
media is over enthusiasm, it touches and then it got blasted.
So it is a threat to their own lives.
Yes,
as
that
well.
is a threat to their own
Shekhar,
lives also.
I'll take a cue from what Mr. Rao has just said, that it is not only about destruction of evidence, it can also lead to threat to the media person's own lives. My question to you here is, we see senior journalists openly naming communities, openly showing religious structures being damaged or burnt even. On another scale, we see that a journalist may not show it on television or write it in the newspaper, but they use their social media handles, which are widely followed, to fan all kinds of sentiments, call out communities, and continue stubbornly to show things which the police and the administration is telling them not to do. Where do you think it needs to stop? And have we really done our duty this whole week?
Smitaji, we have had problems on two particular things. Just now Mr. Rao mentioned about you know, sometimes the television coverage or the media coverage tends to rather, you know, incite, you know, the viewers. I think the whole problem is a lot to do with the so-called television debates we have, where, you know, though even in these times, suddenly the subject turns into who is responsible, who is not responsible, what is the politics, because, you know, when the things are still sought to be brought under control, it's important we don't get into, you know, the causes and all, because those things can be decided in course of police investigation. It can be taken up later. What is immediate and necessary is that the situation is brought under control, and this is about people's lives. You know, people's homes have been damaged, people's shops have been burnt. So it's very important that media plays the role of, you know, showing that how efforts are being made to bring it under control. That is one.
Mr.
And
Rao,
the second thing,
yes.
Smita ji, see, whatever is happening because of that moment of, you know, conflagration.
Yes, yes.
And that is not the final picture, because after all, the passions do come down. People do realize the kind of madness.
Tempers will calm.
Madness is not a permanent state. So the media must realize that some things have happened that has aroused this. And it should not tend to follow a course where one side is seen as the perpetrator, the other side is a victim, because in a violence like this, victims can be on all sides.
Mr. Rao,
and perpetrators can belong to all sides.
Yeah.
as Shekhar just said, you know, everybody knows, every experienced person knows that these times of madness are very short-lived. But like he said, what can the media do? I just asked you what we shouldn't do. But I now want to know, what can the media do to help restore normalcy, to bring peace and to calm tempers, and what are the ways in which we can encourage that?
Yes, yes. As rightly Mr. Shekhar said, that this media's responsibility is to not to show highlights or that negativity of the news, because in such type of violence and the riots, why it happened, that will be seen by the police or investigating agency. Then if media is going to peep into all these regions and they jump into their conclusion also, then it will adversely affect the investigation, as well as in the later stage during trial also. The judge will also be maybe, because he might have seen those in the media news. So the main purpose of media should be that they should try to adequately contribute towards the normalcy of the situation, so that the damage can be controlled, and whosoever done, why he has done, and how many people were along with him, and where is absconding. That is maybe an investigative journalism, that is on a separate thing.
So
but
we can come to that later, you are saying.
But the main emphasis of media should be on a positive direction, not to show the negativity. Because media's news are seen in the internationally also, and Indian news. If we show our negativity to the international level also, then its image of our country is at stake. You might have seen in foreign countries, there are so many such things happen there also, but their media, I don't think that they will showing the dead bodies, yes, or the blood, or so many horrible things they are not showing. And those things should also our media should also learn about it.
Mr. Rao, you just mentioned that there is often violence in other countries, but their media seems to be very responsible when it comes to their people. That brings me to the next subject of discussion.
Yeah.
As far as the Delhi violence goes, the global media was no better. In fact, stories and opinion columns openly laid the blame on the Prime Minister. Even as PM Modi appealed for calm, Home Minister Amit Shah held continuous review meetings of the law and order situation. Countries whose own record of violence has been quite questionable did not stop at that. Terms like massacre and pogrom, with reference to a particular community, were used without any data support. In fact, in one story, they openly misquoted the family of a victim and tried to shield those who are being named by the family. The public broadcaster Prasar Bharati's digital team, PBNS, brought out the true facts. And with that, I come to discussing the next question on the table. Shekhar, somebody writes that the Prime Minister is directly benefiting from the riots and goes on to give all sorts of opinionated feelings, and the newspaper allows it. Another newspaper carries series of stories targeted on a particular community and there is no effort at balancing or taking views of others. A third global newspaper actually misquotes family members to shield a certain accused person. Why is the global media being so uncharitable and so unfair at a time when Delhi is facing violence?
Well, Smitaji, we all know for a fact that this media outlets that you mentioned have a very set agenda, a very set narrative, which is to show that things have been bad since 2014, since the Prime Minister came, and they keep using terms like majoritarianism,
yes,
and Hindu nationalist party is in power, and it fits in with that. And also you must remember that they think they are the guardians of human rights and whatnot, and in India, so they are not interested in getting down to facts. All that they are very very passionate about is to show that a section of the population is being harassed by another section of the population, and it fits in with the narrative.
Allow me a
Whatever does not suit the narrative is left out. Like for instance, you mentioned particularly in the case of that IB officer,
yes,
Ankit Sharma's case, where his family members are now protested in the way the coverage was done by Wall Street Journal, where they were misquoted as to saying that those who did this were shouting slogans.
This is so traumatic.
A particular religious slogan.
This is so traumatic for the victim's family. That's why I want you to allow me a cross question, Shekhar. The question which often comes to be raised in such situations, we've been there earlier. That is, sometimes we blame the editorial policy and the biases of the people running those publications. But can we overlook the fact that the reporters, the people on the ground here in India who send those stories and reports are actually Indians?
No, they are.
So where does the blame lie?
No, Smitaji, these foreign correspondents here, they also follow a set of the coverage being done by a section of the Indian press or a section of the Twitterati, because they want to fit with that narrative, which is, you call it left liberal narrative or whatever. See, they don't want to be appearing to be different, and they do not want to go and find out facts for themselves.
I'll come back to that. But before that, I'll take an answer from Mr. Rao. Sir, I want to come to a particular situation because this is extremely sensitive and worrying for us. When you label a violence to be targeted at a particular community, but you do not have any data to support it. On the contrary, at a time when people are writing editorial pieces as well as news copies, I checked the data with the Ministry of Home Affairs, and the number of people who have been victims of this violence, I'm sorry to say, belong equally to two different communities, which is a very sad situation. My question to you is, has the time come for the police also to become a little modern? Should they give out names of the communities in order to prevent any such narrative happening? Do you think the police and the government need to relook their policy towards communal violence?
Smitaji, no. The police is not supposed to disclose the names of the community, disclose the name of the names of the victims belongs to which community, because that may create a very big issues later on also, and that may flare up the issue in the situation. And that instead
point taken, sir. Point taken.
Yes.
So how do we prevent such people? You know, it can be so damaging, these headlines.
Yes, because instructions
are there. As an administrator, what is, in your view, is the solution?
There are instructions to the investigating officer or the persons who are dealing with such type of cases that they should avoid all these things. But still, if they are, again, I'm saying that if they are out of enthusiasm, they say like this and they quote certain things which should not be quoted by them, then they should be taken to the task by the senior level officers, and then they should be reprimanded, and their future their future should be said that they cannot be deployed on those posts where these can be again. Yes.
So the administration has to take care, and they should reprimand such people, even warn them that they will not be allowed coverage in future. Shekhar, it is very difficult for the government of any country to stop the international media from writing anything. However, are we being weak in pushing our side of the picture? What do you think can be done to prevent such a narrative damaging the social fabric of our country and India's image globally?
Smita, we need to realize that some of these outlets are determined in what they want to do because they have a very set agenda. We cannot which is to for instance, they are all against Prime Minister Modi. They are against BJP since 2014. They are disappointed by the mandate that was renewed in 2019. It's because they cater to that East Coast so-called liberal, the Washington, New York kind of thing, and you cannot, battle them because it's very difficult because they have their own network, they have their own social media. So what we can do is we stick to facts. Whenever such reportings are done, the government of India can bring out those facts, place it before the people, and above all, we must focus on that our media gets it right, because these Western media depend a lot on what is being shown on our television, what is being written on our newspapers. Unfortunately, a section of our own media seems to be rather politically driven in coverages of certain events. So therefore, I would not entirely...
we are providing the firepower.
Yeah, because I would not entirely blame the Western media, because the Western media tends to, see, the whole problem is there is pressure on these media outlets to show that they are liberal. But let them be liberal or illiberal, that is up to them. But the point is, the basic motto of journalism is facts are sacred. Views are free, and there is a need to see that there is not editorialization of coverage, which is the big problem today, because every event is seen in a particular opinionated way rather than a narrative of facts.
Mr. Rao, you were saying something?
Yes. I was saying that these facts should be the actual facts, and that this should not be anything which is driven by some emotions or by some vested interest by these journalists. And moreover, the international media is definitely fed up by the local media or national media, and what they must be having some vested interest and politically motivated also. And then again, I must confirm that these news and the other views, no doubt everybody is free to express their own views through media or something, some in writing or media on print media or in electronic media, but those views should be based on facts, not any imaginary things should not be.
Right, sir.
Yes, yes.
So, as we were taught in the beginning of our careers, views can be anything, but facts are sacrosanct. With that, I have to wind up today's discussion, but what I gather from the two gentlemen here is certain things are very clear. First of all, political biases, liberal being illiberal, supporting a certain establishment, being completely against a certain establishment, all these things can be allowed, but nothing in the media should be allowed to damage the social fabric of the country or to provoke sentiments. And if anybody goes to the extent of doing that, the administration, the establishment, and the media itself must look inside and try to stop them from happening again. Let me thank both the gentlemen here, Shekhar, Mr. Rao, for coming this evening and explaining your views to us. That has been a very fruitful discussion. With that, I must sign off now, but I request all of you to keep sending your valuable feedback on Media Scan, and we here will continue to scan the media.
On program DD Dialogue titled Homecoming of Kashmiri Pundits, the Way Forward.
मोदी जी से ये उम्मीद है अमित शाह जी के कहने पर, क्योंकि उसने पार्लियामेंट में आश्वासन दिया कि कश्मीरी पंडितों के लिए एक अच्छी बेहबूदी स्कीम बना कर रखी है.
If Jews can go back to their homeland after 2000 years, why not we?
हम कोई migrants नहीं है, इसकी टर्मिनोलॉजी गलत दी गई है.
19th January is commemorated across the world by all Kashmiri Pandits living all over the world as Holocaust Day.
वहाँ धक्के खा के हम मजबूरन वहाँ से निकलना पड़ा, जैसे कि मेरे घर में भी बम ब्लास्ट किया गया.
There's a hope in us that they have done monumental decisions they have taken. They can take a monumental decision, identify a land with political empowerment of Kashmiri displaced people.
The communal sector debate and they will say